Morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever your time zone. Welcome. This is AI Talk, and I am your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. Today, we will be discussing the topic of data delivery in digital transformation and AI transformation. Look, our ambitions with AI will only succeed if our data flows seamlessly. Research shows that over 70% of AI initiatives fail to deliver real business impact due to fragmented or siloed data, making intelligent, real-time data delivery a critical factor in digital transformation. So, what should you do to ensure your success? In today, we'll discuss three key topics to consider. First, we'll look at why intelligent data delivery is critical for digital and AI transformation. Where are the bottlenecks and how can we eliminate them? We'll also look at real-time data strategies for AI innovation. How can teams ensure data is not just accessible, but actionable in real time? And finally, we'll look at building a sustainable data delivery architecture. What technical and organizational practices help maintain seamless, governed, scalable data workflows? It's going to be a great session today, and we're going to dive in just a second. But first, I want to say thank you to everyone attending today. And that includes you folks on LinkedIn, joining us on LinkedIn. Hello, everyone. And hello to everyone joining us today on Zoom. Thank you for all of you for being here today. During today's discussion, look, I want to hear from you too. So I'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate. Join in with your comments in the chat section. And if you have a question along the way, just jump on in. I will attempt to get your questions and comments into the flow of the show. So, all right, with all of that said, let's get into our great panel of guests today. Let's introduce, starting with Jared Johnson, Senior Technology Evangelist at CData Software Incorporated. Jared, are you with us?
I am here and I'm excited. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you, Jared. Where are you calling in from today?
Yeah, so just outside of the Raleigh-Durham area in North Carolina.
Raleigh Durham, wonderful. Well, Jared, it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much. Joining us also today is Christian Hull, Chief Technology Officer at Tax Canary. Christian, are you with us?
I am here.
Hello, Christian. Welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from the quite wintry south of England. Um,
Okay, very good. Keep warm there, Christian. All right, very good. Thank you for being with us. And also with us today is Nabil Nawaz, Global CIO and M&A Leader at IBM. Nabil, are you with us?
I am indeed very much happy to
Hel-
be here.
Hello, Nabil. Welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from today?
Hey, Kevin, I'm also calling in from South London.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, Jared, Christian, Nabil, it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much. I'd like to start our discussion today by pointing our attention to an article published by Adepto that traces the shift of data architecture over time from traditional centralized warehouses through more modern innovations and paradigms such as data fabrics and data meshes. It explains how each stage emerged to address new demands, bigger data volumes, diverse formats, real-time analysis, governance, scalability, those kinds of things. The key message here really in the article is that no one size fits all. The best architecture depends on a company's data needs, scale, and organizational context. I'm wondering what everyone thinks about this article today. Jared, I'd like to start with you if I could. What are your thoughts on the article?
Yeah, no, so I mean, I think it was very informative, very educational. I was reminded of things that I had forgotten about the journey from organizations moving through different data architectures to fuel their initiatives. The thing that caught me the most is something that we're actually seeing in-house at CData, and that's the idea is that the central data team, and this might be a little controversial, is the problem, not the solution. So I'll unpack that a little bit. They're not the total problem, but one of the things that the author described was the data mesh, where data ownership moves away from the centralized data team and into the actual subject matter experts' hands. So now the experts that know what they need have access to the data that they need when they need it. They don't have to wait for the data team to build the pipeline. And this is especially important when you're looking at AI transformation. So you're looking to experiment with AI, experiment with models, and having to wait weeks for the central data team to move the data into a warehouse or into a data lake or something that those agents can access isn't helpful when you're trying to iterate quickly, when you're trying to experiment, fail quickly as needed so that you can build something with AI that's actually useful.
So the teams are the problem you're saying. Well, not necessarily the teams, but perhaps the speed with which we react and work with the data. What can we do to ameliorate that problem?
Yeah, so I think the getting around that involves adopting either practices or technologies that provide that more real-time access to data that you described, whether that's going through a centralized data layer, using a real-time iPaaS, or some other solution that puts data in the hands of the people that are reporting on it, that are building on it, that are trying to find the value from it. So you still need pipelines, I think, historical, and we can get into this more, but doing something to give people access to the right data at the right time in the right ways is one of the ways to get around waiting for IT to build pipelines.
All right, very good. Now, Christian, what are your thoughts on the article? Jared's saying, look, data, you've got to be able to find it, you've got to be able to use it, and it's got to be effective. What are your thoughts on the article? Does it miss anything important that we should be considering?
Um, yeah, I think we're kind of this whole data landscape. We're talking about the same thing. It's a landscape that we all know reasonably well. But I think I really like what Jared was saying there about the teams being the problem. I think things like data mesh, and it's amazing. It's really really cool technology, and it's something that a lot of people have been dreaming about for a long time, and it's finally here. That's amazing. But if you're in an organization that can actually use data mesh, pat yourself on the back because you're a privileged person. It's not a technology question. Anyone, if they've got deep enough pockets, can buy a data mesh. Okay, cool. But you need the right people around it, and it's. I agree. I don't want to call it a people problem because it's not a people problem, but it's a people challenge. And certain organizations are just a million miles from, or possibly a million years from being able to consider this kind of technology as being beneficial to them. I've worked with some firms. This would kill them. They would just fold if they tried to implement this kind of technology. They just can't. No way. They are. It's. So I think there needs to be a realization, and I like some of the moving away from the article slightly, but I like some of the kind of the management practices which are coming around, kind of more product centric teams where you don't, this divide between technology and the business never made sense. It was just convenient. If you focus around the product, you get the right people at the table. So that those things where we're saying people saying, hey, I need this data. Well, there's also people saying, tell me why you need that data. And those people are important too. But the risk of that clash can mean you can drown in bureaucracy. And it's very easy for risk-centered people to just throw up walls and walls and walls of bureaucracy, which kills these projects. So I think the real art is now we've got that technology bedrock of these things. We need to be smart in a business structural way about how do we organize for success. If you've got a business which runs on data, which increasingly is the case, you can't be using archaic business models of how you've structured your people and expect this new technology to work. It's not going to, well, it will, but it'll work very badly and you'll be very frustrated.
Now, Nabil, what are your thoughts on the article? What did you like about the article, and what should we should consider in our strategies?
Thanks, Christian and Jared, and thanks for the question, Kevin. So I actually liked a couple of things. I think it was very, very informative, but it also laid out an evolution around where data came from in a sense. And I love the fact that it's kind of an evolution of the utilization and the use of data and how much basically we all started using data in our organizations and generally. And it went from exploding data volumes to diverse data types. Then that gave rise to governance needs and demands, for agility. So it went through that whole piece, and the 6 or 7 frameworks that it talked about sort of progressed in an evolutionary manner as those as we increase the needs, as we increase the volumes, as we increase the data types, etc. So, but then therein lies, the governance challenge. So no one ever thought about a governance challenge as big as sometimes we're getting. Obviously, regulated industries aside. So I really like the way technology, the needs of data, our needs of data ballooned, and then technology kind of followed by saying, okay, well, actually, no, don't use a warehouse. Now you can use a lake. Now you can use a lake house. And then, to Christian's point about now we're at mesh, right? So that's an interesting way, but again, it's not for everybody. And to his point, I like that point, which is, make sure it's for purpose. And hopefully, we'll get onto this in some of the questions later, but it's really make sure it's fit for purpose and for value.
The article is from Adepto. It is called Understanding Modern Data Architecture and Evolution from Warehouses to Mesh. There is a link here in the chat feature. Everybody take a look and let us know what you think. Does it resonate with you? What were some of the parts of the article that you thought were particularly valuable, and what are some things that perhaps it overlooked? We'd like to hear from you as well. All right, very good. Well, gentlemen, I'd like to move us into our first discussion point today, and that is why intelligent data delivery is critical for digital transformation and AI transformation. A survey this year by Fivetran found that 42% of organizations said that more than half of their AI projects were delayed, either or underperformed or failed outright, largely due to poor data readiness, highlighting how trapped or siloed data remains a fundamental obstacle. Nabil, from a global CIO perspective, what are some of the key organizational or technological challenges that can help us ensure intelligent data delivery?
Right.
Nabil?
So, sorry, yeah, just getting myself off mute there. So I think there's a really important kind of um, a differentiation between sort of the legacy world and the sort of the modern tech world, the modern sort of data world. And I think it's critical. There's like a three-step strategy that typically I've seen works very well, and we adopt that internally. And I'll go into each of those just very briefly. I think the first thing is that a data strategy, the second is data delivery, and then the third is data operations and evolution, right? Some of these may be obvious, but I think it's really important to start off with a data strategy, which is really where you review, your business objectives. Not all data and determine your value case. Not all um, silos of data in your company are going to be valuable. There are tons and tons of systems that churn out, volumes of data, which frankly might not be very useful. So it's really important, therefore, to build a sort of a business case and make sure that you understand what's the business value you're after, right? Um, and then secondly, it's about the data delivery. So there you start separating the legacy um, from the sort of the modern. You start understanding sort of what's fit for purpose, and can you can you afford it too, right? So create that data lake, be a data lake, create a data warehouse, and bring that strategy to not force immediate migration, but try and build that data delivery model out so that you can create something that's fit for purpose and that allows you to sort of bridge the two worlds. And then you move into data operations, which also includes governance. So you bring a governance perspective into there. So things are tagged, you understand um, especially these days with all the different regulations that exist, especially in Europe and across, like what can you tag, what has PI, what has SPI, etc. But just making that more front and center as opposed to sort of an afterthought. And then, obviously data operations evolution means you're doing the performance, maintenance, break fix operation, and you're doing sort of continuous development and testing throughout. So that's the three kind of, again, to summarize, data strategy, data delivery, and data operations and evolution would be a great way to bridge the two worlds.
Yeah, great 3 points to consider from your perspective, Nabil, how do poor data flows affect the success of AI and digital transformation at scale?
Um, great question to unpack. I think the obvious one is hallucination. The obvious one is, if I may, just talking rubbish. The result, you put garbage in, you put garbage, you take garbage out, right? So, I think that's really the most simplistic view. But again, on the flip side of that, if you can sort of create governance as a built-in mode across the transformation, the stages that I just mentioned, then you can at least make sure that it doesn't end up um, in gobbledygook as it comes in. You can make sure you verify, ratify it, and then create audit trails to where you got it from too. I think that's also very critical. We don't necessarily always stamp where we got it from, and so as to the authenticity, so you can sort of go back and trail if something didn't work out. You can go back and see why it didn't
Mhm.
turn out as it was meant to.
And of course, we know gobbledygook is a technical term that we should all be considering these days.
Indeed.
Now, Jared, what are the most common barriers that you see in organizations trying to deliver data efficiently across silos?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it goes, Nabil, you made the point that, you don't need everything. You don't need all of your data from all of your silos. And I think one of the earliest hurdles that we encounter, both internally and that we've seen in the field, is customers just not knowing what is in their silos. They don't have good visibility into those systems, whether that's because it's a legacy, or we like to use the word enterprise system that has existed for decades, that has had data pumped into it for decades, that has accumulated data over decades. Just not understanding what's there is probably the first hurdle that we see. And so adopting a practice that allows for the subject matter experts, as I said before, access to that data, to explore it, to understand it, to describe it, and then work with data teams to build out the proper models for reporting, for visualization, for AI efforts, is where we see, as soon as you leap that first hurdle, the race gets a little easier. Knowing
Mhm.
what is in all of your silos, where what you need is being stored, is the first really big step into building a modern data infrastructure that allows you to explore, modern data initiatives, which includes AI.
And Jared, how do these barriers specifically impact AI deployment and digital transformation? Like I said earlier, 42% of organizations said that half their AI projects were delayed or failed. What's the impact of this on our initiatives, and what should we do about it?
Yeah, well, so I mean, the statistic speaks for itself, right? If we don't have access to the right data, then the AI initiatives just fail. They're not producing whatever results we're pursuing in attempting to adopt those AI initiatives. But I think it goes further in that you end up possibly with incomplete answers, incomplete solutions, because you're not pulling all of the data that you need from all of the places where it is being stored. And whether that is a strategy that involves using a warehouse or a lake house, or whether that's a real-time integration strategy, if you're not giving the models the data that it needs to analyze to answer the questions that you need, right? Am I getting a full and complete picture of my customer's health if I don't know how many support tickets they've submitted? If I don't know, let's say I sell a product, right? I'm Tesla. If I don't have all of the information about my customers' usage of their products, which features are they using? How often are they driving? How often are they charging their car? Am I creating an informed picture of my business? Am I able to make innovations? Am I able to create reports that are meaningful if I don't have all of that information? So you run into the problem of AI initiatives failing, but even those that look like they succeed may be incomplete.
Now, Christian, how does data delivery influence your ability to deploy AI-driven solutions in a highly regulated environment like taxation?
Taxation is great fun because the raw data, i.e., tax policy, is unstructured, very unstructured, horrifically unstructured data. Um, which is it's fun when you've got nice structured data that's already in tables. For us, it's a lot of what we're looking at the moment is actually analyzing essentially text data, which is written by lawyers with an intent to obfuscate, with an intent to leave grey areas that they could come back for later. It's some of the most obtuse legal writing you could use. And then you've got layers of logic on top. So yeah, we've got a great fun thing there. But I wouldn't really say I'd love to talk about it at length, and I can, but I won't, because it fascinates me. And honestly, it's what wakes me up with a smile every morning trying to figure this out. I think going back to a few of the other points here, when we're talking about legacy, to me, legacy, I immediately go to technical debt. And in our data sets, particularly a kind of enterprise and large firms that have been around for more than 2 years, they will have legacy, they'll have technical debt. And what is that really? It's the sins of the past. And again, we're going back to humans being humans and doing human things, which is, a number of years ago, someone was delivering a program to do something, a project, and they had a budget of this much money, and they got this way through it, and they're like, we don't have enough money left to finish. So what do? You can ask for more money. Ha ha, that never happens. So you don't do that. What do you really do? You reduce scope. So when you originally had a vision of, oh yeah, we will have all this data in there, it will truly represent the client, you end up with, we represent the important bits. Or my favorite fudge is, so I came from banking. So, I worked 25 years at BNY Mellon, and I worked various other places. Simple constructs like bank account, or transaction. If you're thinking about payments in a large enterprise bank, those payments, although at a simple level, are all the same. It's a amount of a currency, being reduced on one account and increased on equally on the other account. That's what a payment is. The simple level, fine. But for an AI level, we want more than that. We want to know why. We want to know what it represents, and that's where it gets funky. Because in that one payment platform, you've got payments which are driven by completely different, wildly different behaviors, and sometimes that project behavior where they fudge it in the last leg means that they take a field that was intended for X and they cram Y into it. And they walk away going, we'll fix that in phase 2, which never happens either. And therefore you have your technical debt. You have this sin of the past. So when we come on to like, oh, brilliant, we'll take this field that's labeled as X, and when I cursory look at it, it looks like it's X, and I try and bring it forward, those poor souls who do data lineage go, hold on a second, what's all this stuff doing in here? What is it? How does this make any sense? And it doesn't. And it's operationally it works. There's hard-coded rules hiding away in the background that mean that operationally it works. That's cool. But from a data point of view, it's toxic, it's a mess. And the only way to solve it is to actually go back to that project and do the phase 2 that never got done. If you're talking about a legacy bank, there are more phase 2s that need to be done than they are willing to pay for, which is a real problem, when you're looking at this stuff. So I think you've got to be very, very pragmatic. So that's just what, when you talk about legacy, whereas, if it's modern, if it's a brand new, neobank, they don't have any of that. They built, and I've worked with a few. Every time I just walked away from the meeting, frankly jealous, going, wow, imagine having, an infrastructure which is clean and all the labels mean, do what they say they mean and stuff. But yeah, I think in terms of that data pipeline, as we said earlier, the tooling is great. An AI, you can stick AI, you can build, machine learning, predictive models, etc., on top of stuff. But if you've got toxic mess in that data set, well, frankly, the predictive model will do its job and it will go, statistically, this data is not the same. And therefore you'll get wacky results. And then people are going to be going, oh yeah, the data is terrible. And you're like, yep, whose fault is that? It's yours. But I don't like to apportion blame. I think it's just, this is pragmatism. This is real life. This is how
Okay.
you do a project, you do it well enough to get it over the line, and it's that constant prioritizing what's the most important thing to do today kind of thinking. But it does lead to a bit of a problem. Yeah.
All right. All right. This is AI Talk, and we're here with Jared Johnson from CData, Christian Hull from Tax Canary, and Nabil Nawaz from IBM. We're talking about the role of data in digital transformation and AI transformation. Gentlemen, I'd like to move us on to our second discussion point. Oh, but before I do, I want to remind everyone, if you have a question or a comment for our panel, please jump on in the webinar chat feature. We will be happy to receive your comments and questions for our panel along the way. All right, now let's move on to discussion point number 2. And I've been eager to get to this idea of real-time data, real-time strategies for AI innovation. Again, according to that same 5Trend report I mentioned earlier, 41% of companies say a lack of real-time data access prevents AI models from really delivering useful, timely insights. We've been talking a little bit about that, sort of circling the idea that latency in data delivery directly hampers AI performance. Christian, in your experience, what are the risks and best practices for delivering sensitive data in real time, and how does it change the way your AI tools operate?
Yeah, so I am CTO at Tax Canary. I'm also working at another. I've got a portfolio job or career these days, so I'm also working at another startup, Lamata. Actually, we experienced this there because we deliver solutions to our clients, and we can deliver them real time, or we can deliver them by a batch. And nearly always, batch makes more sense. Real time, it depends on the use case, but true real time data. I can think of some spaces in the financial services world, because that's the domain I know best, where obviously you need real time data. If you're doing not crypto, if you're doing algo trading, their concept of real time is faster than the human eye can even contemplate, and they pay a lot of money for that. And that's an old technology. They've been working on, well, old. It's an old use case. They've been working on it for a very long time, and they're very good at it. I find real time is one of those. It's one of those things that when you're talking to a client, they're kind of like, oh yeah, I want real time, because it feels like that's the right answer. No, they don't really know one way or the other, but they're kind of like, oh well, yeah, obviously I should. That sounds better. I'll have that. And then you're like, okay, let me explain. And they're like, oh no, I don't want that. I think there's true live real time data is amazing, but genuinely not many strong use cases for it. If you were to stack up all of your use cases, you'd have a lot more that don't justify the massive headache of true real. Because you can have, when I'm saying non-real time, it doesn't mean once a month. It could be once a minute, it could be once every 15 seconds. Usually, if a human is the receiving party, true live isn't necessary. If they want to adjust their system and then see what effect that had on the data, once every 15 seconds is fine. By the time they've done the adjustment, press save, looked up at the screen, it's refreshed, and bang, everyone's happy. So if the data architecture can be run that way in like micro batches, it's a hell of a lot easier to build, just so much easier to build. And that if you're running inference and things like that, you need data in there. So do you want to be building AI systems which are truly considering the data that arrived in the last nanosecond? Well, that's a lovely ask, but it's pretty science fiction-y. It's not about data delivery. We're talking about AI here being the thing. So if you're really looking for an AI probability-based outcome from the data, true live, I don't buy it, frankly. I just don't. Batch makes more sense. There are other reasons why true live makes sense, but yeah,
Interesting.
I think the right approach is be pragmatic and Don't be kind of
Hmm.
tempted by the shiny baubles unless you need them, and then justify it. It goes back to, and I'll shut up. It goes back to good old fashioned build a business case, and a business case should be here's the benefit, here's the cost, here's what we've got to do. If you can't write that, then you don't have a business case. You shouldn't be talking to anyone about it yet. It's kind of that simple.
Well, Christian is bringing up an interesting idea. I mean, what, how do you define real time and how real does it need to be, right? Jared, what technologies or approaches do you feel are most effective for enabling real time data access for AI applications? And what's your thought on how real time does it need to be?
Yeah, so I'll start with the latter half of that question. And I think in the context of AI, when you're thinking about the timeliness of data access, how quickly, how relevant is the data that the AI agent, the LLM is accessing? I think you have to ask yourself, you have to go to the business case. So like you said, Christian, like what is it that you're trying to do? Are you building reports? Are you doing analysis? Uh, in that case, batches are probably great. Micro batches are even better. So you can get near real time every 15 seconds, every 30 seconds. You hit refresh on this AI dashboard that you've built, and it is able to retrieve refresh data from a lakehouse or data warehouse or whatever the case is. I think where you need real time, and in this context, outside of things like IoT devices, sensors, things like that, Kafka streams, real time is still some sort of call and response. That's the world that we live in. You have to ask a question to get an answer, unless you've hooked yourself up to some sort of digital fire hose. So, for what we're talking about here, what I'm talking about here, real time is I get an answer on the most up to date data when I ask the question, or when I want to perform an action. And I think that's where real time connectivity is the most valuable.
Yeah.
You can't go.
Right. So can I just interrupt for a sec?
Yeah, please do.
There's a question from LinkedIn there, which I think I agree with you. Someone was
Okay.
asking about real-time analysis of something like fraud detection.
Yeah.
That's as you said, call and response. So, I have a payment, I need to assess it for fraud. I want to do an analysis of this specific payment and get an answer straight back. Great.
Right.
If you call that real time, then yeah, we need real time. I
Mm.
suppose it kind of is. I've never thought of it in that direction. But the data set, the model that has been trained to answer that model doesn't need to be up to the very last second. Frankly, there's nothing that happened in the last 15 seconds that's going to make any damn difference to that fraud algorithm. It just isn't. And
Right.
a true fraud algorithm isn't going to be able to refactor that fast anyway, because the amount of data in one of those. I remember building one once, and we literally ran the training run for 24 hours, non-stop compute in a big data center. They're not. So what is this concept of real time on that end? It's bonkers. But in terms of having AI features that need to respond in real time, oh God, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's bring Nabil in on this. And Nabil, we do have a question from one of our LinkedIn visitors today, and I'm just hoping you could help me with it, Nabil. The question is, for which specific AI use cases, like fraud detection, is true real-time data delivery a non-negotiable requirement? And where can a near real-time replicated approach suffice? Nabil, can you put a perspective on it for us?
Sure, sure. I mean, I agree with what Christian said and Jared said, but I feel like there's a couple of different things that are out there that I just want to grab onto and give my own perspective. So I remember I used to work with so again, going back to the business case, and it's about really what you want to achieve, right? Um, I remember working for when I used to work for Cisco, and there was a real excitement at the company, and it was one of the best run companies I've seen, wherein that they said that the CFO of the company could quote unquote close their books within any given 24-hour period. Okay, this is not to do with AI. This is simply to do with the access of data, enough data, just because they could have access to it and make decisions on it within a 24-hour period because that's the follow the sun approach because they're a global company, right? And they could close their books within a 24-hour period. Um, Now, you can imagine that that in itself, just having the ability to, trial balances and ledgers and what have you, just to be able to call out how much we made, in this day or in this period is huge. Now, that does not necessarily mean, to Christian's point about going back to train models and the inferences and what have you, what you have to do. That's a different piece. But the question that comes in and from LinkedIn is interesting from a fraud detection perspective. I slightly disagree, and Christian, I'd like to hear your perspective on what you said. And um, so just imagine fraud detection is something that maybe in your opinion, like I'm making a payment, it's a large payment, it probably it fails some of the typical checks, so you need to add another layer. To your point, can a real-time piece of data go and train my model and give me the right decision that quickly? No, it probably can't. But then there's also this concept of RAG, right? Which, I mean, in my limited understanding of it, and I don't know if, and I know that models are getting faster, superior, sophisticated. And I'm thinking about a slightly different use case, which is infosec, right? Which is trying to understand um, threat patterns and algorithms, right? And you know that there are new ones being generated at every minute, right? Everywhere. And so your algorithm, or sorry, your LLM is trained to understand, let's say you have a domain specific LLM that actually understands the patterns. And if you were to, again, I'm just thinking this out loud and shoot me down if it doesn't make sense. Imagine the ability to have a RAG pattern that actually assesses, understands, and sees a pattern, sends it back, quote unquote, real time, and then allows you to then query something to say, is this pattern a threat? Could it do that? I think it might be able to, depending upon what you feed it. So this then straddles the line of, the every other day, or this allows you then a way of potentially kind of getting in that kind of real-time data, training something and be able to answer through AI, tracking a pattern that might be dangerous. So I'd be interested to hear other thoughts around the RAG use case.
I think RAG just means that you've got your own data. You're not using public data at a very basic level. You're using an AI model and you're pointing it at your own curated data set. So I totally agree. You couldn't be non-RAG in this scenario. I think when you talk about fraud detection, it's less about LLMs. It's more about machine learning algorithms.
Yeah.
You're looking for, well, there's two obvious ones. Anomaly detection. One of these transactions is not like the other. Trouble is, fraudsters are pretty good at making them look like the other.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. That if they said, hey, pay this known terrorist this much money, we don't need AI to detect that. We've already got scanners looking for that kind of stuff. Have done for a very long time.
Yeah.
The pattern recognition bit, that's the one I said where we trained it for 24 hours on our historical data. That's what we were doing. Literally analyzing a bank scale data set of payment transactions and saying, is there anything in here that looks like it might be fishy? And it came up with, I think, if I remember right, it came up with about 40 potential ones, and then we referred those to experts to get investigated. But yeah, that kind of stuff. And this was a few years ago, so it's probably be faster to run it now. There's better server stacks.
Okay.
But it's that kind of pattern recognition in a fraud data set is mind-bogglingly hard. Just because it's adversarial. You're trying to identify something which is really trying very, very hard to hide, and is deliberately obfuscated with lots of false flags. So it's not an easy use case.
All right. All right, we are here today. This is AI Talk. We're here with Jared Johnson, Christian Hull, and Nabil Nawaz. Gentlemen, our time is running very short, and I would like to get one last question into Jared about our third point here, building a sustainable delivery architecture. Again, research shows that among organizations that do centralize their data, more than two-thirds still spend over 80% of their data engineering resources on just maintaining pipelines, leaving little capacity for innovation unless architecture is designed to scale. Jared, from your perspective, what are some of the key design principles for building a data architecture that scales with AI initiatives successfully?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and one that I could talk about at length, but I know that we don't have at length for me to spend on it, so I'll try to keep it succinct. I think the first thing that you need to look at when you're designing this architecture is, does your plan, does your strategy have connectivity to everything that you need? Are you building connectivity in-house? Are you going to adopt third-party connectivity? I'd be remiss in not tooting CData's horn a little bit as a data connectivity solution provider. But I think that's the first thing that you have to look at is, do you have the connectivity that you need to all of the data sources that you need, whether that's this near real time, through an API or through an MCP server, model context protocol, that was released by Anthropic like a year ago, I think last month. But do you have access to it in a call and response nature? Are you planning to build a warehouse? But we can go back to Christian's point about what's the business use case. I think probably 20% of your data is needed for warehousing that you need to store long term. That's probably all you need to build pipelines for. And then that hopefully helps to reduce the time that your IT team is spending building and maintaining these warehouses. And then the rest of it, you can probably do like a simple call and response action. We see this, through a lot of the reporting tools that exist, right? Power BI has a connector to Salesforce. Tableau has a connector to MongoDB or to NetSuite or whatever the case is. So you don't have to store that data in the warehouse. The tools that you're using have direct access to it. So getting that access, making sure that everything that can talk to everything, identifying where that data is, as I said before, figuring out what needs to be warehoused, what can be done in real time. And then as you're thinking about the connectivity technologies, are you looking at solutions that are brittle and don't scale? Like, is your pipeline only hostable on premises? Well, if that's the case, now you've got to distribute a pipeline across an entire organization. Is your pipeline a solution that can be hosted centrally, but still has access to all your on-premise data? Is it a cloud solution? And those are all things that you need to consider as you're looking into it. Moving away from maybe these brittle legacy pipeline technologies into something that's more modern, that gives you near real time, lets you do your batches, as Christian described. Maybe does it incorporate a RAG functionality? There's a lot here, and I feel like I'm going to start to take the rest of the time. So I'll pause there and then.
Well, there is a lot to cover, but unfortunately, it looks like we are just about out of time. Jared, Christian, Nabil, it has been great speaking with you today. Before I let you go, I have one last question. I was wondering if each of you could please provide us with one quick action item that our viewers can use to take advantage of your ideas and advice. Nabil, do you have an action item for us?
I will just go back to the original point that I made, the action item where I was talking about the three-step process, and that is typically think about your data strategy, think about your data delivery, and think about your data operations and evolution in that order.
That is Nabil Nawaz, Global CIO and M&A leader at IBM. Nabil, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Christian, do you have an action item for us?
Yeah, I'm not gonna beat Nabil because that's very smart, and I'm jealous I didn't say that. But building on it, I 100% agree with what Nabil said. You need a good structure, you need a good, sensible thing that includes governance. I think the only thing I build on is that initial bit where you're dreaming up what I want to do. Be client centric. Think about who is the benefactor. If you look around the room and it's only technologists, shut the meeting, go away, find the people who aren't technologists, and start another meeting. Because like if it's just tech, you don't get a vote. You're tech. That's it. You need the business. You need the people who talk to the clients. Do that. Be client centric. Bring tech in, bring risk in, bring legal guys in, bring all the people you're scared of, bring them all in one meeting and lock the door and don't let them out until you've all decided on something. That's good, but but be holistic. I think that's my takeaway.
That is Christian Hull, Chief Technology Officer at Tax Canary. Christian, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Now, Jared, do you have an action item for us today?
Yeah, so I think strategically, what we're calling it at CData is you're building your data foundation for AI. You want to think about connectivity. Do you have access to all the data that you need? Does your AI have the proper context? So does it have full fidelity access? Does it have access to not to more like the complete all of the data that you need? Does it have access to schema? Does it have access to relationships between data sources? Does it have access to custom objects and fields? And then control. And this gets into the governance piece that Christian was talking about. Can you trust the data? Can you trust the users? Can you trust the agents? Is that built into your strategy as you're defining this out? And so I would just welcome everyone to check out cdata.com/AI. You can learn about how we handle that and maybe use that to inform your strategy moving forward.
That is Jared Johnson, Senior Technology Evangelist at CData. Jared, thank you so much for being with us. And gentlemen, it has been a great discussion today. What a great panel. Your perspectives and advice are spot on. So thank you so much. I do hope we get a chance to talk again soon. And to everyone joining us today, thank you too. Listen, join us again next time on December 9th with another great panel of guests. We'll be discussing supply chain Gen AI. That should be another great discussion. In the meantime, if you'd like to find me, you can do so on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there. Check me out. I'm Kevin Crane, and you can check out my weekly audio podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But for now, that'll do it for this episode of AI Talk. And until next time, I am Kevin Crane saying thanks for watching.